You'll unmute yourself.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you, Dan. Do I still sound okay?
You sound fine.
Okay, good. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us on. Dan, we really appreciate it. As you can see, there's some of our committee members from the Public Relations Committee who are on, and because I know everything and they know everything else. So we're a good team. We've been working together for many years, and we really want to have a brainstorming session here with the section managers and the other folks that are on from the field services to talk a little bit about field day. We're going to share some ideas about where we're coming from the Public Relations Committee, some of the things that we're working on. And then also I'm going to ask some of our subject matter experts like Andy, KK4LWR, and John, who's busy running a net control for about another 20 minutes. So I'll call on him right away so that he has to run the net and comment at the same time. But you can probably see him, he's on right in the middle of my screen. So John will be on and talking about some of the social media ideas that we have. And we're all aware that the COVID and the pandemic and the stay at home and all the other newsworthy health and medical ideas have really impacted what we find is to be normal for hams for field day. And so we've been talking about some ideas, and we started it off last Wednesday, and I see many familiar call signs and faces from our public information coordinator calls that we had last week. There was one during the day and the rest were at night. So I was on the conference bridge for about 8.5 hours. It was such a great time. I met a lot of new people, and some of those are your public information officers and public information coordinators from your section. The biggest thing is we want to make sure that questions that you have get answered relative to what we're doing at the Public Relations Committee. And it's going to be important, although we're kind of in the middle of working with and coordinating with and collaborating with field services, but also having responsibilities to the board and coordination and collaboration with headquarters. Everybody who's on my committee is a member volunteer. None of us are full-time employees or even part-time employees. Well, maybe we are, but I just haven't seen the checks yet, but I'm sure they're in my mailbox, maybe my email box. But the idea that everybody from my team that's here, and they all put in extra effort just like you do, and they put in the extra time, and they're really, really dedicated. We've been able to get some really fun things done with our field day calls that will start up again next Thursday. And if you didn't receive that message, I'll be happy to get that to you. We're going to have right now, we're going to have 5 different opportunities on Thursdays. One's going to be during the day and the rest are going to be at night. I've got some that are kind of late so that folks on Pacific time and our friends in Alaska and Hawaii will have an opportunity to get in at a decent time instead of waking up in the middle of the night to be on one of our calls. So with the idea when Rick Roderick gave me a call, and I had been on the PR committee for quite a few years, and he said, hey, would you be the chairman? I said, well, here's what I'd like to do. I feel strongly that we need to reinvigorate the PIOs and the PICs, get connected with the sections and the section leadership so that we can do our best to be all on the same page. And when I spoke with Dan last week, he said, hey, could you come on down, be the next contestant on The Price is Right, and talk about some of the things that you're doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Bill and N2COP to say a couple words, and then we'll get started. But like I said, the key is we want to share information. We want to make new friends, new colleagues. And the bottom line is we want to let you know as section leadership, for those of you that are section leaders, that we're here and we want to be able to help out. We're not part of field services, but we're kind of this hybrid. Many of us on this team are either presently PIOs and PICs or have been in the past. And so we know what some of your folks that are trying to do public relations, some of the balancing act that they have to do. And then we identify and try to help them make it easier for them to do their PIO or PIC job. So Bill, do you have a few comments, please?
There we go.
There you go.
All right. Sid, thank you very much. And Dan, again, thank you for allowing the ARL Public Relations Committee to come on tonight and explain the importance of public relations, especially as Field Day approaches. For 2020, President Rick Roderick appointed me as the board liaison from the board of directors to the Public Relations Committee, and that is a bi-directional flow of information. My job is twofold. Mine is to attend the Public Relations Committee meetings and come back to the board with things that the committee needs. And then conversely, I also go back to the Public Relations Committee and share the goals and objectives of the board of directors. What makes this time of year unique is the fact that Field Day is coming up. Field Day is the only national event in amateur radio in which amateur radio controls 100% of the message. Every other national event, amateur radio is secondary, and being secondary, many times in media coverage, it falls off the map. So the one time a year that we get to truly promote amateur radio is through Field Day. And I am saying that, telling folks that because of that, and because it's the one event nationally in which we control the message, the shelf life of the material that is developed over Field Day weekend has to last another 51 weeks until the 4th week in June the following year. And why is this important? It's important for 3 reasons, and those 3 are the 3 levels of government. It's not that the PIOs themselves out in the field take on this responsibility, but the media that's generated is used by members of our board and like section managers in the field to deal with issues at the federal, state, and local level. Let me give you an example. Media citations at the federal level are being used with staff and with elected officials in the Amateur Radio Parity Act. And things that we can demonstrate there that have been in newspapers, in broadcast television, and in broadcast radio, along with social media, helps to plead the case that we would like more sponsors of that legislation. It also helps with executive agencies like the Federal Communications Commission. At the state level, media citations are very instrumental in the introduction of much of the distracted driving, anti-cell phone, anti-texting legislation in which we try to obtain amateur radio exemptions. And at the local level, understanding amateur radio helps with those amateurs who aren't under HOA restrictions, who may be going to planning or zoning boards seeking variances for installations of towers and antennas. Many times the people who regulate various things that we want to do in our lives may not be familiar with amateur radio. If somebody can dig into a treasure chest of information and pull out various podcasts, videos, newspaper clippings, magazine articles, blogs that show the value of amateur radio, then PIOs have fulfilled their jobs. While the PRC here tonight is here to help provide the resources to the PIOs in the field, a reminder, the PRC does not appoint public information coordinators and public information officers. They are appointed by the 71 section managers. So the purpose of tonight's session is to really let the section managers know how much we rely on their PICs and PIOs, and also to emphasize that with about 7 weeks to go to Field Day, whatever form it's going to take this year, we really would like to count on that. Sid, before I pass it back to you, if I may, sometime tonight, I think it would be good just to have a quick round to introduce to everybody who are the members on our Public Relations Committee. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back to Sid, NH7C.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Bill. And yes, that was next on the agenda. So as I do on my calls, I'll just go in order of where I see them on my screen. We've got Angel Whiskey Papa 3 Golf Whiskey. He's our representative, and from Puerto Rico. He's been doing a lot of extra work helping to put together Spanish translations of numerous different documents and rules, including World Amateur Radio Day. And he worked most recently, to make sure that, and this is something that we're going to be making sure everybody else knows about, that Field Day is a Region 2 event. It's not just a United States and Canada event. And that's going to be one of our hints later, especially when we think of how do we get excited about doing Field Day from our homes. That added element might help out, especially new people and people who are young. Maybe they haven't had their share of DX or have never even talked to somebody from another country. So this is going to be a great opportunity to focus on that. So he's been on the committee for many, many years, and I always appreciate his help, especially because he tells me stories about Oscar. Okay. Next on my screen, Andy, KK4LWR. He's a great guy. He works with social media all the time. I'm going to ask him to say a few words, like John, in reference to some of their social media activities and some of their hints. And he's going to tell you about some of his other groups that he works with. Well, I won't steal his thunder. I'll just say he's got some really interesting things. So John's just come off his duties, KD0SFY. He's in Colorado, and he'll be sharing a few words in a moment. We've got Ed Fchak, who does all kinds of great work, Whiskey X-Ray 2 Radio, and I'm going to ask him to say a few words because we're going to talk about our link to lifelong learning at the headquarters, and and he's done a lot of work with our PR 101, our introduction class, and so I'm going to ask him to say a few words on that. He's been very busy with that. And we've got Gordon Mooninghan, Whiskey 4 Echo Golf Mike, and he is our go-getter. We got all kinds of stories, but he looks pretty relaxed on that couch. Usually he's in a chair, and so he's ready for tonight's questions. Some of you might know that Dave Isker and one RSN moved on. He's left headquarters. He's opening a new chapter in his life, and we're really, really happy with what he was able to do for us. He went from zero to hero in just seconds, going from somebody who was a journalist who really jumped in with both feet when it came to helping us out in the Public Relations Committee. So we wish him the best. And we have a new guy that's helping us out, but he's not new to any of you. So we've got Bob, NQ1R, who has stepped up, and when the acting CEO asked for somebody to help out with public relations and make sure that he and the rest of the team at headquarters are connected with what we're trying to do with the Public Relations Committee, he put his hand up just like he did there, and he's been hitting a lot of home runs, even though there haven't been any baseball games. But he's got the best average in the league right now. So that's did I miss anybody? I hope not. Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. Sorry, Scott. Scott, KK4ECR. He's our man in Florida. He helps us out with a lot of the committee work, a lot of review of documents, and so it's great, except I forgot him. So now I have to buy the beers next time, and so he's good with that. That was 2 thumbs up. One of the ways that we communicate as the PIOs, PICs, and the Public Relations Committee is we've got the PR Reflector. So that's something that's run by headquarters right now. I won't say this very loud, but Bob's in charge of additions and deletions and changes if people can't figure that out. That's something that's really helped us out because we have to know who's on our list to make sure that we're getting information out and having that two-way communication. So as we've got over 500 people on that list right now, and it's a great forum to share information, but as was pointed out with a lot of emails, we have to make sure that we're getting our message out. So we've been trying something new to the Public Relations Committee, but not really new to me. I come from an emergency management and public safety background. So conference calls like this are things that I've used for many, many years. Of course, they used to just be audio, and now with the video. So the idea of bringing people together to talk about specific subjects has been very important and been on our list of goals and objectives. So last year in May on Thursdays, like we're doing this year, we had numerous field day related public relations conference calls. There weren't set agendas. We did have some information that we shared with every call, but we tried to take some information, and it was very important that not only did the participants hear what we had to say, but we heard what they had to say. So we had all the people on the committee had a lot of notes, and that helped us out with some of our efforts. We also use a teleconference bridge on the GoToMeeting system for our virtual joint information centers, or VJIC. And we have that open for, I believe, 3 tropical systems that threaten the United States, and then the Midwest tornado outbreak, the one that tried to blow the roof off Hare Arena in North Dayton and put the final dagger into that building. So what we did is we had an open bridge similar to this, and we made sure that people were monitoring so that we could pass information. I know specifically the PIC for Ohio was located in the State of Ohio Emergency Operations Center, and he participated with us on a regular basis. We took information that he shared with us, sent it to headquarters, and that was in briefing papers and things that were shared online through the website. So if you have interest or you'd like to talk to me about what goes on the PR Reflector, I'll be happy to take your call or your email, set something up so we can have a chat. It can tend to be a lot of email, a lot of discussion. So it's a great forum for PIOs and PICs, especially new people that have that mic fright or that key fright that we all had when we first started out. So it's a great forum, and we get a lot done there. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it over to Ed, WX2R, talk about a little bit about our connection with the PR 101, and a few comments from you, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Sid. Everybody can hear me, right? Shake your heads. There you go. First, that's great. And thanks, Sid. Just a quick update for everybody is that everybody knows that there's if you don't know, okay, is that, we put out a PR handbook, PR 101 handbook, that is basically, by its definition, it's a primer to give everybody a basic background in terms of looking at what PR is all about, how do you approach the media, and really sort of how do you put together a PR program together. I'm the PIC for Northern New Jersey. I was appointed, I guess, 3 years ago, although I was the PIO for the section back in the late 80s and early 90s. Bill W2UDT and I go back a long way in terms of looking at this. But and the point why I bring it up is that when I came back 3 years ago and took a look at the handbook, one of the things that we were looking to update is one of the things that surprised me was that the handbook did not look all that much different in 2016 than what it did in 1980 and 1990. And the PR world and the media world has changed quite a bit. My background has been in newspapers and television and running a marketing agency. And the PR that we knew back in the 80s and 90s looked a heck of a lot different than it does today. So my task, I guess, in getting started was first to do a sort of an overview and a rewrite where we could bring it up to speed in terms of contemporaneity. From there, once I was exhausted, because my background has basically been in legacy media, but in giving it over to the committee and asking everybody else to, really with a fresh pair of eyes, take a look at the handbook and say, how can we bring it up, bring it up to speed, really make it more contemporary. And I think that's where we are now. The book is basically, I think we've basically gone through a couple of drafts. I think we're happy with where we are right now. And I think, where we are is that it's basically in the pipeline in terms of getting itself released through the lifelong learning project, which I'm sure will come up, as part of the overall discussion. And obviously, I mean, those types of things I think are going to be, very important, particularly if you're just getting started, in the PR world, where the definition of relationships and the types of people and who you talk to, in terms of traditional media and in terms of looking at social media today have changed. Every organization is a media company today. And I think that's the big difference from 20 and 30 years ago. And I think that's what's really important, is that if you put yourself in that mindset and realize that you're your own media company, and what you can control through your social media, what you can do in terms of how you talk to them, how you talk to the press, is a lot different today and a lot more important. It actually has a lot more value in many respects than what it did 20 years ago. So anyway, Sid, I mean, that's where we are, and let me turn it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it. One of the other things that the committee does that may be of interest to the audience here is we are the group that collects the nominations for 2 public relations related awards. One being the McGann Award, which is our internal amateur radio operators and PR people who are recognized for their expertise and what they've done to help amateur radio be noticed outside of the amateur world. And then we've got the Leonard Award, which is the outside media, and when they make us look good as ham radio and the amateur radio service. So when you see those awards, we ask for nominations, and anyone can nominate anyone else. There's some criteria that's on the website, and we send that out on a regular basis. You may have seen that recently because we pushed back the deadline for the McGann Award until 15 June instead of 15 May. So if you have questions on those, and your PIO and the PICs, if they have questions, then please let us know. We have a McGann Award winner in Gordon, W4EGM. I'm going to send it to him for just a couple comments about the awards and his thoughts on that. Hey, Gordon, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Sid. My thoughts on the awards. Last year was the first year that I was on the committee to look at the awards. And what really struck me in the submissions was the number of errors, typos, things that should be caught. And, if you're going to submit something for an award, make sure it's the best work. Go over it with a fine-tooth comb. Have someone else look at it too, to a fresh set of eyes, as Ed said, to catch any mistakes that you might overlook. If I can just digress for a minute, every PIO, this should be your Bible, the AP style book. Use this. You won't go wrong with media for any type of public relations, any press release or anything. But that's basically my take on the award, is check for typos, make sure what you submit is your best work. And back to you, Sid.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. And just so that the group that's on the call here tonight knows, we'll take the nominations from anywhere. And if there aren't enough nominations, or the quality of the nominations are not up to the standards that the PRC has, then we do not forward those nominations to the board for their consideration. So we collect the nominations, and we cull the herd, we distill it down using the committee and their review of all the nominations, and then that gets submitted. Bill helps out, gets that to the board, so the board can review our recommendations and they make the final award. It's great. People are very excited about getting the awards, and there were some pictures that made it to QST and on the website of Jim Cantori and the award when that was presented to the Weather Channel when they were the recipients of the Leonard Award, the past Leonard Award. And so that's something good for all of us when outside can see what we're doing with the McGann Award, and then everyone else can see what media is doing to help us with the Leonard Award. I'm going to give Bob NQ1R. For some reason, I just picked that up right away. It's like I worked him on 47 gigahertz slow scan between here in Maryland and Connecticut. So Bob, over to you for a couple comments, some of your thoughts now that you're working with us and some things that maybe the section managers can pick up from what we're doing. Go ahead, please, sir.
Thanks, Sid. Boy, I'll tell you, it's a hardworking committee, and there's a lot of back and forth with just earnest interest in making sure amateur radio is well represented. From Field Day to ARIS, amateur radio on the International Space Station, it's exciting to see the flow of information that occurs in even just the short amount of time I've been supporting the committee from a headquarters perspective. It's been a little bit of a learning curve, but I have a high amount of appreciation for the PIOs and PICs, which are an incredible resource to the organization when we're talking about how we represent the future growth of our amateur radio service in the relationships that we build in our communities. And Sid and I had a little talk about this earlier today, but I was saying how I think the press is really important. But one of the ways that we grow amateur radio is also through our relationships as individual hams with our clubs and with our family and friends. And the PIOs and PICs can help us with that. They can help frame the type of things that radio amateurs are doing to advance the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio. This COVID-19 issue right now is an incredible opportunity for amateur radio to shine in very special ways right now. If you think about it, healthcare workers were thrust into a situation that some of them never dreamed that they'd be in. But I also think that the time for amateur radio and radio communications to shine happens on and off in history all the time. And so there's never been a better time than now for amateur radio operators to look inward and say, do I have a personal radio communication capability? I know that I'm a member of my radio club. I know that I play with other hams all the time, but do I have a personal radio communication capability? And I hope that story weaves its way into Field Day this year as Field Day operations take a different shape. Not the typical group shape, but a lot of individuals operating in unique situations. How many Field Day participants this year will participate that haven't before because they either didn't have a radio club or they never thought about operating in a way that demonstrates their personal radio communication capability. So I'm excited to see how we can frame that in news releases, in information that we feed the PIOs and PICs, in templates, so they can talk about it to the media and to the press, but also so they can talk about it to their communities and to other radio clubs and in club newsletters, encouraging more and more radio amateurs to get on the air for Field Day this year. I think it's going to be very exciting. And if you haven't seen the back of the Field Day t-shirts, it's a gold mine. It has on the back of the Field Day t-shirts all of the sections and provinces that are participating in Field Day this year as checkoffs. And I think it's going to be so fun to imagine some father or mother in their ham shack participating in Field Day or out in the field somewhere, and their kids with a magic marker on the back of their shirts checking off the sections as they're working them. You got to check out the shirts. They're amazing. Over to you, Sid.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. Yeah, usually when I get a new country, I put a pin in there, so I hope that no kids try to put pins in those shirts. might have to send magic markers with the shirts. I don't know.
That's right. We were saying that we should have sold them with fabric markers.
There we go. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate that perspective. And of course, I really appreciate all your assistance. I know that you've got many, many, many things to do, especially not even being able to work out of your office. So I would like to say thank you once again for your help. All right, what I'm going to do next, because this came up on our public information coordinator calls last week, we talked a lot about social media and how social media can be helpful, everything from Facebook to Instagram to Pinterest. And so what I'll do is I'll ask Andy to go first, and then I'll have John come in afterwards. And Andy, if you could just share a couple things, maybe some comments from our PIC calls, but maybe some other helpful hints for the folks that are on this call. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sid. Social media is definitely changing the way that we communicate and changing the way that we share information. So having a social media presence isn't really like an option now. It's sort of expected of most organizations, and amateur radio is no different. I get to help do a lot of work with the CARI, the Collegiate Amateur Radio stuff, as well as I'm president of the Disney Amateur Radio Club here at the Walt Disney World Resort. And for us, you know, in both sort of situations, social media is a key to not only connect with our members, but also connect with the world around us. A lot of people are really interested in Disney and love working us as a club. So social media is one way that we can reach out there. Likewise, college students don't generally watch, you know, the news or read a newspaper. They're much more interested in what they see, you know, on Reddit or Discord or Twitter or Facebook. So, you know, reaching out to that crowd sort of a thing. So from that perspective, you know, having a social media presence is one thing, but also having an active and engaging social media presence is probably the bigger thing. And that would mean that you're, you know, when someone comments, you reply to their comment within a reasonable time frame. You don't wait 3 weeks because you'll lose their interest. You sort of plan out, we didn't really talk about this on the last call, but it's something that I'm sort of in the middle of right now, partly because I have a whole bunch of time due to our furloughs. You know, is how you make a social media plan and what does that look like going into a particular event. So like on the Disney side, our club is already starting to look at Field Day, and we're starting to retweet and post on our Facebook, you know, some of the Field Day stuff we did last year, some personal projects people are doing, that sort of thing. Not because we're trying to say, hey, Field Day, you know, is a big thing, but just trying to get that sort of in the conversation again. We have, you know, a couple of months before it's Field Day, so we got plenty of time to sort of build this up. And by doing that now and having that plan, we can sort of get people excited and engaged. Likewise, with the CARI stuff, we have the Collegiate QSO party coming up in September, which I would invite everyone here to participate with, and feel free to promote. But getting college clubs on the air, you know, requires us to sort of give them the tools to plan and to sort of piggyback on campus events. So, you know, we have our regular CARI calls that happen once a month. And then, you know, we're also starting to start those conversations on social media. We have a date for it. We have, you know, some themes for it, and, you know, some goals that we have, and some rule updates. So coordinating a QST article post, but also, you know, what does that look like for the Facebook page? And then working with the communication staff at the league also to sort of coordinate out, you know, promotion there, and what, you know, and what those things. So right now I'm still very much in the planning phase. You know, we have 4 months before we get to that point. And I work with my brother, Tony, KD8RTT, on that. And, you know, we're sort of getting our ideas together. We're getting the website put together. There is a website from last year. You can go look at it, collegiateqsoparty.org. But, you know, we're getting that all updated, and it just takes time. And then once we have all that content ready and we share it, there's going to be questions and there's going to be feedback, and preparing how we're going to handle that, how we're going to promote that within the Facebook group, and that sort of thing. So, you know, social media, you know, is a different beast altogether. You know, we jokingly say Pinterest is our favorite site, even though it's not terribly social in terms of its interactions. But you know, how you address it and how you get involved is becoming more and more critical. I wouldn't say it's more critical than conventional media by any sense, but definitely pivoting towards the younger generation. You know, sort of, I'm 30, and if you're talking, you know, my generation, the millennials and sort of younger, you know, you're talking about, you know, a generation that grew up with the internet, and, you know, one that is not reading a newspaper, and making sure that you can connect with them, and, you know, sharing the hobby in that regard. So those are some of the big concepts I hit on during the call. You know, is mainly, you know, be on social media in the first place, but once you're on there, you know, be active and say something. You know, you don't have to post every day. You don't have to post every 5 minutes, but if you post regularly and you post engaging content and you follow up with whoever reads it so that they feel like that they're being acknowledged, that's a great way to sort of, you know, gain some good traction and everything. So.
All right, great. Thank you, Andy. And John, if you could spend a minute and talk about some of your success stories using social media and how you've been able to not only connect our internal audience, but also get the message out to those around you. Please go ahead, sir.
Sure. Is this thing working? Okay. So, you know, Andy was talking about reaching out to the younger crowd and engaging directly instead of going through the traditional media. One of the things you can do with social media, and that I found was very powerful, where I had some successes, is using social media to engage the traditional media. In my area, just about every reporter, every news station has a Twitter account. So they use Twitter a lot. So by going out to the websites for each of the news stations and the newspapers, and just looking at, usually they have an about the team or something like that in their menu, going in there, finding those personalities, following them on Twitter, interacting with them on Twitter. I was able to get a TV spot where we had a young reporter who had a challenge segment where viewers would basically suggest things for her to try and do. So we challenged her to make a tape measure antenna. And we had a lot of fun doing that. Of course, the segments are very small, but it was seen by quite a few people, and it worked out quite well. Your local meteorologists, if you're active in Skywarn or weather spotting, a lot of them are going to be on Twitter as well. So you can interact with them, and you can build that relationship part of your PR with these news media personalities, and that will give you a little bit of an in when it comes time to try and float a story or send a press release out to folks. You know, Andy also talked a little bit about making sure that you're using it. So it's not enough just to have a social media presence. You do have to use it. I see a lot of folks out there that they'll create a Facebook page or they'll create a Twitter account, and then it languishes. Well, it's not doing you any good. And one of the things that also you might want to think about with Facebook is Facebook has kind of been replacing the web pages in a lot of ways, because you can do a lot of stuff that's much more interactive with Facebook, but you can still do a lot of the stuff that you would normally do with a normal web page on there. You can also have internal discussions. You can set up discussion groups. So there's one for field day. As a matter of fact, that the ARRL has set up specifically a discussion about field day, what people are doing to get ready for it, things like that. So it's a great way to share information with other ham radio operators. And, you know, it's not just young people who are on social media. I'm 57 years old. I figured Twitter out pretty well all by myself. You know, there's quite a few folks out there who actually have a pretty good presence out. I'm not sure if anybody has read anything by K0NR or what Steve's called W0 or WG0AT, who's very big into soda. Both of them are active on social media. So, you know, don't be afraid of it. Get out there and try it. It was a little disheartening for me when I took a look at my section, and I took a look at all the clubs and organizations in my section, and a little over half had web pages. Probably less than a third had a Facebook page, and only a handful had more than one social media presence. They had just a Facebook page or they had just a Twitter account, and that was it. So get out there, play with it. Like I said, don't be afraid of it. It's fairly easy to learn. And I recommend starting with either Facebook or Twitter. Those are two of the very popular ones. Twitter is very easy to use. Facebook, just about everybody's got a Facebook page these days. So get out there and try it. And if you need help, contact one of us. We'll be more than happy to help you out.
All right, thanks a lot, John. And I am going to ask Scott and Angel if they've got any comments, but I'll just dovetail into what John was saying. One of the things that we're trying to do, and many of the people who are on this call, and there are just so many other people that have come into our hobby because of someone else, whether it's a relative, a dad, an uncle, a grandfather, grandmother, aunt, just friends. Somebody had an Elmer, somebody had the time to spend with this person, so they got excited about our hobby. And when I'm heavily involved with the community emergency response team training specifically right now in the state of California, although it's on hold right now because it's classroom and hands-on, so it's got to wait till the COVID restrictions are over. But I always ask when I give either the communications lecture or I just ask, hey, I'm Sid, I'm NH7C, I'm a ham radio operator, are you? And I see all these hands go up. So many folks have joined just to provide communications for their community emergency response team or CERT team. So those folks that they've learned a lot, they want to help, they want to be part of something. And so what we're trying to do with our public relations committee, as John and the other members have said, we want to be helpful. If we're long distance Elmers, then we're doing our job. We want to try to make it easy for your PIOs and PICs and other people interested in PR. We want to make it easy so that they're successful. Because if they're successful, that makes your section look successful. And when your section's successful, of course, the division looks good, and then we all look good. So even though we've got 500 people on our list, it's just, we're like any other club. We don't have 500 plus active people, but we do have a good core of very knowledgeable people, many of them past McGann Award winners that monitor our board. We've got section managers who are on there who have PR experience. And it's just like ham radio. We're sort of the Swiss Army knife of PR as it relates to the ARRL. So just a thought, when you look at the PIO and PIC responsibility list that's on the ARRL website, that's overwhelming for even the people on this committee who do PR to help out, and even those folks that do it every day. That's a great list. I don't know that anybody's ever finished that list. So if you've got somebody who's struggling as a PIO or PIC, don't let them focus on that. Just like walking, one step at a time. And then it's like a bicycle. You never forget how to ride a bike. So before we get to the questions, if there are any, I know we're cognizant of people's time and an hour was set aside for this. I will ask Scott, do you have any comments for the group?
No, Sid, just glad to be here tonight, and hope that I can learn from everybody that's here, as well as give any input that answer any questions that they might have as well.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Angel, do you have any comments for folks?
Okay, now I'm muted over here. Okay, thank you very much for everybody for being here. First time I see big bosses here. I could do like this to say hello, Oscar. Well, as we know, our Amateur Radio Day, April 18th every year is very important for the world. For us, it's Field Day. And this is going to be a special one because we're going to operate Class D about social distancing. Well, these are 2 past months I've been thinking about what about social distancing. And the idea came out that, wow, amateurs, we are doing this for more than a century. I mean, we communicate with other people at the distance, and up to now, things on amateur radio have been almost the same if we communicate by radio with our friends. It's no difference. And there's a plus on this opportunity. I mean, we make DX, we make Untitled Friends from Repeaters, Simplex. It's the same thing. We report, well, how are things doing? How are how are the health? I was thinking also about the sections. I think we when we work field, we work also sections. I think for next year we can propose an idea to put. I know there's a map of sections. We could put it on the field day package, because I understand there are some programs that have a map so you can follow up. I know that the N3FJP software program has a map that you can follow up. If you work a section, it goes in the map. Hey, what about a work of sections award or something like that for the future? It's for the future. And let's see. Okay, and the mention that, I don't know if you ever seen on the field day package also that field day is open for everybody on region 2. I've been reading this every year, and I think once a few years ago a teacher from Colombia participated. But then you think, well, how many DX people you work on field day? My experience is that because we are in the air, they want to work anybody. So you put it also in there with points. So it's a plus for field day. And let me see what else. Okay, and about this being proactive on PIO PICs locally, and Oscar knows that I do it, that over here, part of the PIO PIC, I mean the PIC here on the session, is that as a part plus proactive thing I do over here is go sometimes to nets and give any kind of news, and I have some reflectors, like a PO reflector. I reflect from different groups, and if I see some kind of news of notes, I pass it on to local clubs to let them know. I don't know if PIOs, PICs do it. It's like a section newsletter, could say, but on reflectors. That's what I do over here. So some kind of plus. And I think that this what I have over here, just in case I'm here for any questions also. Thank you for the opportunity for all of you. Thank you, Sid, for notifying, and keep on the good work.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Angel. Really appreciate all your extra work you put into getting that field day is a Region 2 event confirmed, and we'll make sure that as we already have started, to make sure that message gets out. Well, excellent. All right, real quick, I know that I asked some of the committee members to talk about some specific things. Anything else we missed from my committee that you want to mention before we hand it back over to Dan? All right, don't see any hands, didn't hear anything. Thank you very much. We'll be happy to answer your questions, but we really appreciate an opportunity to, and thank you to Dan, because although we're communicators, sometimes we don't communicate. And it's important to make sure that there's, even if there's a wall or a fence between us, at least there's an open gate so that we can continue to talk. And we feel very passionate about what we do and our jobs to help the league and to help amateur radio be successful. And once again, if you, your PIO, your PIC need help, please let us know. We're going to be happy to help them out. We hope people take advantage of our field day calls that we'll have on Thursday, starting next Thursday. And if we need to have more calls or we need to join you again here on Dan's call, we're going to be happy to do it. So from my committee, I'd like to say thank you very much. Back to you, Dan.
Okay, well, thank you, Sid. That's a great presentation from you and all your committee members there. Really appreciate it. Are there any questions out there?
Marty, Maryland, DC.
Okay, Marty.
Hello, and many familiar faces. Hello, Sid. I know you don't write or call anymore, but that's all right.
You're too busy now that you're a FEMA guy.
I'll stop it. I'll stop it. Well, measure success, I'll say that. So my question, and perhaps maybe adding a comment, as far as social media goes, one of the challenges that I found early on was being able to successfully measure the effectiveness of social media. The programs are mostly in tune with an individual, and the excuse me, and the ability to measure analytics within the program to see their effectiveness isn't really measuring much unless you understand a lot of the nomenclature that comes with the programs, like Twitter, for example, or like Facebook. So have you have your group at the Public Relations thought about perhaps helping the PIOs, PICs, and section managers to coordinate a more effective message in social media so that they can be measured? And because it's such a diverse community, sometimes it needs to be multiple messages. But have you thought about maybe giving us a dummies guide to social media?
Well, I'll start that off. Thank you, Marty. I appreciate it. Neighbor. And
Neighbor.
I will say that we have been looking, some of the methods that we've used have really been low tech. So for example, when we put out our messages about conference calls, I ask people to email me, and then I give them the codes to get into the call. So I know who they are, but then I can see how many people have responded. And I will say that Steve Ewald has done a great job for the Public Relations Committee in getting the messages out to the section managers. We had excellent participation in our PIC calls last week, and of course this is great participation too. So he's helping us getting the message out. I know that myself and with some of the things that I do for my day job, I do use Google Analytics and those kinds of tools, but I'll throw it over to Andy and see if John might have some comments, more of the amateur radio world. Andy, why don't you go ahead first?
Yeah, on social media, the question over effectiveness and metrics is really quite an interesting one. And from what I've seen, there's sort of two schools of thought on it. There's some people that are very much number driven. I'm an engineer, so I very much like the number driven thing. But the problem is quantifying it in a comparable and trackable way is largely impossible because you tracking your social media impact is not the goal of many of these platforms. Take, for example, YouTube versus Facebook. YouTube considers a view after 30 seconds of someone watching a video. Facebook considers it 3 seconds. Facebook also autoplays the video in your feed automatically. So if you scroll through a Facebook feed and your video pops up and it takes it 3 seconds to go from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen, that's a recorded view as far as Facebook's concerned. And then you're trying to track these numbers. So I am not someone who's really big on the number game because there's no standard number yet. For a technology that's been around for 20 years plus, this concept of social media hasn't really standardized anything yet. And that's because Facebook really wants everyone to think that people are watching videos on Facebook so that they stop watching videos on YouTube and they get that ad revenue. It's a game and they're out to make money. Instead, what I prefer to look at in terms of tracking effectiveness is engagement through comments. And I don't look at, necessarily quantity of comments because, you can get a lot of just like first or, great video comments that bring absolutely nothing. I like to look at the more substantive comments and seeing, is there a discussion going on? Is it sparking another question and does it grow? So around field day, it's really a good time to sort of watch the comments instead of watching the numbers, mainly because no one's really going to like and get really super excited about you posting your field day score or posting, a picture of your log. What you will get a lot of on field day is some great engagement from, people you either worked or people that, are following along. For instance, last year on field day, I was on our Disney Club Twitter and I was posting, our log and who we were working in some of the areas. And the comments that came back, both direct messages and comments on those posts, were very, very, I wouldn't say they were very, very few. The view exposure was lower than we average. We usually get a few hundred views for a post on Twitter, you know, and we were maybe getting 5 or 10 because, to the vast majority of people, it's not an interesting post. But the comments, though, that I was getting from that were far more useful than any view, because I was getting comments saying, hey, I'm in this, area. I would love to work Disney. Hey, I'm staying at a resort right now. Where are you guys on property? Can I come meet up during field day? And we had people that found us on social media like that, and the post maybe had that comment. And we said, oh, yeah, we're in the field. You can see us here on the ARL field day tracker, and then post the link. And that's all the conversation was. And 20 minutes later, they show up and they're like, oh, can we get on the air with you guys? My wife and kids are in the park right now. I want to, get on the air. So I tend to be more of the school of thought of the engagement and what does that actually yield. It's a little bit harder of a thing to track because it requires a much more conscientious observer. You got to make sure that, you're engaged in everything. But that's usually the social media impacts that are more meaningful, and that would be the better way to gauge effectiveness. And from like a section point of view, think of it this way. If you share section news out to every ham and you tell them to follow it, you might get 1 million views on, your section news, which is great that everyone saw that news. But did they see the line at the end that said, hey, you should come by the next, ham fest that we're having in 3 weeks? The answer might be no, because they're like, oh, it's my section. I sort of know everything that's going on anyway. Versus if you had a more engaging post and you followed it up when someone asked, oh, hey, I saw this. Can you tell me more? That sort of yields more tangible results. And that would be my recommendation.
Sid, Marty for Andy.
Go ahead.
So Andy, one of the things I find to be very beneficial is the interrelationship that I've created here in the Maryland, DC section. So good example of this is what's on Facebook is on Twitter. What's on Twitter is on Facebook. What's on the website is linked to both. Trying to find but actually doing the threading of making sure that I'm hitting the maximum number of individuals in the areas that they might find interesting, as well as using social media as that platform to move the message forward. I don't find it effective sending out section emails because the only way I can measure that is whether or not anybody shows up for the net, because I don't get emails back from them through the list server. So it's kind of a one-way thing. The other way of capitalizing on this, I'll just add this before we go to John. The capitalizing on this is to give them a query that they have to answer to move forward. It's kind of like find the prize. So, for example, when we had the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds fly through Baltimore, I sent out a message across the section and said, hey, we're going to track the flight on Echolink. Does anybody want to participate? And the next thing I know, I've got Echolink owners of nodes wanting to connect repeaters together, and we're tracking the Blue Angels. We're tracking the fighters going through Maryland using Echolink voice over radio over IP capability. Well, after it was over, I realized that it must have worked because I had people saying, hey, are you still tracking those? So they heard what was going on, but they missed the message at the time. So my final question to you, Andy, is do you find that live interaction like you see in Facebook and others, when you see somebody's doing a live session, do you find that, or have you ever had experience in that being potentially beneficial and drawing interest?
Yes. The more live stuff you can do, live tweeting is a thing. It's very commonly done actually by professional journalists when they're at big media reveals and stuff. They'll live tweet the event when they don't allow a live stream. I've been actually doing a lot of live streaming since my furlough started for first teams and stuff like that, because that's one of my other hobbies is first robotics and mentoring teams. And I have one coming up tomorrow night, for example, on a Lego set. I know had I just posted, hey, look at the new Lego Spike Prime set that came out, come take a look at it, you know, I'm going to get a certain amount of impact, but I'm also going to get a lot of people are going to be like, oh man. As where if you do the live thing, you do get that direct engagement, and you also create a timeliness to that engagement.
Okay.
So like you suggested with the Echo link, how people were like, man, I missed out. You know, FOMO is a real thing. I know I'm very millennial in saying FOMO. But it is a thing, and that will actually drive up, you know, engagement and reads. You know, if you do events that, you know, are sort of one time and make people feel special, you will have higher attention paid to you because they know that, oh, hey, there's something unique and special coming along.
Sure.
I'm not, you know, so yeah, so I really do recommend the live engagement. I more or less live tweet field day, for example. But, you know, the more real time and up to the minute, the better. The only thing is you got to make sure that you're not posting noise. You know, making a post saying the sky is blue is not going to get you anywhere, you know, as where
Right.
you can say, oh, look, the Blue Angels are flying over right now. Here's a live stream of them, you know, approaching and over.
Right.
You know, then you show your kid freaking out, you know, that's a different, you know, sort of engagement.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Sid. Back to you.
Okay, good. And one of the things that Andy did on our PIC calls, he actually, I gave him the screen and he showed us what he can do on, it was live, so I guess it was really interesting because it was to me. And he just showed how to go from hashtag to hashtag on all these different platforms. And so that's some of the messaging that you're going to see from us is we're going to ask people to use the hashtags, the hashtag ARL, hashtag ARLFD for field day, and other ones for other events. Once you get the hang of the hashtags, and as Andy and John have said, and you're confident with the message that it's important to the community that you're sharing it with, those are great, especially for people who might not know anything about what we're doing, but oh, you put on a South Florida hashtag about a special event that ham radio is running. Well,
Right.
that's going to bring in a lot of other people. So that's something that you'll see from us because they've been important and they're still important. So,
yeah,
John, what else might you have for Marty to answer his question? Do you have anything else you wanted to add, John?
I was going to say, you know, a lot of the same things that Andy hit on is, you know, there are a lot of tools out there for the different social media platforms that will give you analytics and what they call engagements. What that translates to in effectiveness, when you start having the conversation, that's something that's effective. So you've got somebody's attention and they're interacting with you. And that's kind of the goal with social media, is to get the people to interact with you. So, you know, talking about the Blue Angels, when the Thunderbirds were flying for the graduation out here, I was listening to them on the radio. And so I did a Facebook Live of what I was doing to listen in. And all of my friends, many of whom are not amateur radio operators, were tuning in and watching what I was doing. A few that were ham radio operators were asking me, oh, what frequency are they on? Where are you tracking them? You know, where are they in the state at this time? So those are effective. Somebody shares your Facebook post or retweets your post on Twitter. Those are engagements, but how effective are they? Well, that remains to be seen. With the hashtags, it's really good to use a couple of different hashtags, and that was one of the things that Andy was showing. Is if I'm doing Skywarn stuff, Colorado weather, the hashtag would be hashtag COWX for Colorado, WX is for weather. So if I put in there hashtag COWX, then everybody who's following information about the Colorado weather sees it, not just the people who follow my account. And if I also throw in there the hashtag ham radio or amateur radio, then that's something that they may click on and follow it to learn more about amateur radio. So it becomes kind of a multiplier when you start doing the hashtags. You can overdo them. They recommend 2 maybe 3 at the most. You do see some people, they'll put like 15 hashtags on something, and that's not super effective. But I think Andy hit on a lot of the same things that I was going to say. And back to you, Sid.
Yes, Sid, Marty, to John quick, please.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
John, I've also recognized both in Facebook postings and Twitter accounts the lack of custodianship. I'll call it that because I can't think of a nicer word to call it. Basically, the intention is good, but then it turns into a trash can. And the reason why is because a lot of people like Facebook, so they'll like your page, and I had to turn off all of my likes because what was happening was that people were liking things that I didn't think were appropriate for the section Facebook page. And I was trying to avoid having to explain why our section Facebook page was actually having information posted, I'll just say about medicine, prescriptions, or whatever they were posting. And so my suggestion, if I could just add this comment to the conversation, is you have to also engage your PIC and PIO to let them know what the section and the league expects as professionalism when it comes to social media. It is appropriate to post certain things that are radio related, but we've always heard the cliche, don't talk about politics or religion. And let me add a couple of more to that one, okay? I don't need to know if your dog went to the vet, or I don't need to know if you've found a new job or anything like that. But I've also found that there are certain postings in Facebook that are useful when it comes to things like weather postings, closures of schools, other things that are not always disaster related. Maybe there's a gathering for a motorcycle thing. There's a very careful balance, and it needs to be monitored, and the moderator needs to be very forceful in removing content that is not appropriate. So thank you very much, Sid, Andy, and John. I appreciate that. Gives me some insight to move forward.
Hey, on that comment, you're 100% right. With Facebook, there are pages and there are groups. So my approach to Facebook is that we have pages for our organizations, and those are fairly locked down. We don't allow just anybody to post on the pages. We do set up discussion groups, and we do, even though they're a public group, we do ask people to apply to join. Everybody can see what's being posted on them, but we don't let just everybody and their brother sign up. And, you know, you can kind of control the message a little bit, or control the abuse a little bit like that. But you're 100% correct that if you're going to have one of those pages, you need to do your due diligence. And it's something that I'm very sensitive to, being the head of a very large Aries organization, is I can lose the trust of my served agencies in a heartbeat if somebody posts the wrong things.
We've got a standard disclaimer that we put on these things that basically says that this is, you know, this site is as a hobby and entertainment, and, you know, that none of this information can be verified. You know, you have to do those kinds of things, unfortunately, because you don't want the repercussions. I see you're ready to say something, John. You don't want somebody to come back and say, I read it on your Facebook page. And there's a guilt by association when it comes to large groups like this. Thank you very much, John.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Right, back to you, Dan. Whoop.
Yeah, now I get to unmute myself. I was sitting there making sure I didn't cough and steal the show or whatever. Well, Sid, Marty, Andy, the whole bunch of you there. This is a very good session. I'm going to encourage the SMs and others here to share the video link I'll send on this so that others can learn from this. Also might be a good opportunity to attract in the sections that need to have a PIC or a PIO. This would be a good movie to use maybe pull that in with. Is there any questions here out there?
I do have a question.
Okay, Oscar.
Hey, hi everybody. You know, I know that your team are thinking how to approach with the social distancing, and what would be the best approach on your ideas with the coronavirus if it's extended to June, July to make the field day? I mean, do you have thought about it? How can we approach and motivate people to go to the field day? And I don't want to, I want you to give us the idea. For example, what would be the best way of doing it that you have thought about it? I want to see if you have any ideas about how to approach we will not be able to probably meet in a park or in a forest or somewhere. So that's my question, and good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Oscar. Appreciate that. And we're thinking about it both inside communications, inside our ham radio world, but also getting out to the public and the media. And I know Bill's got some things that he wants to share. What we're thinking about doing is highlighting the resiliency and the commitment that our amateur radio operators have to provide a service and to serve the public. And we're looking at ideas very similar to what you're seeing if you do turn on the TV and see how they bring in experts on video teleconferencing just like this. We're going to look into, and we're going to do some, take some baby steps here locally to see if some of our ideas are going to run with the television, with media folks. We don't know if that's setting up a video teleconference like this, and at the top of the hour we have a 10-minute program or a 5-minute program from someone who is actively participating in field day so that media people can ask questions. It could be something where I've already had the COVID virus, so they can come over to my house and not get sick, and they can set up a camera here, although I'm going to have to do something better than my antennas, so I'll have to improve my antennas. But the idea is to see people and to get that real feeling. And I know it's difficult for some folks. They're great amateur radio operators, but when that media microphone goes in front of them or the camera's on, as you can see from the video teleconference here, I've got the face for radio and the voice for newsprint. And so that's why I use CW a lot. So the idea is having that appropriate person, that spokesperson or the champion. And we hope to share some of our results and some of the feedback that we get from the media. What we've been thinking about, and I'll give it to Bill in just a second, we've been thinking about some other initiatives, getting back to that point I mentioned earlier about Elmer's. And clubs, there have been some really good ideas on how to get people excited in clubs and to see if they can get 100% of their membership on the air, even if it's just the repeater. And because a lot of people still monitor our repeaters, so there could be a lot of public relations there. So I'll stop there for a second and give it back to Bill because he's got some ideas too.
Thanks, Sid. Appreciate that. And it's been a great set of commentary tonight. I've been on and off the ARL Public Relations Committee since 1995. And one of my goals, as Andy pointed out, Facebook's been around for quite a while. And one of the goals we've had on the PRC for years is on field day weekend to have one of our postings hit the trend cycle so that traditional media, by traditional media, I mean broadcast television news operations, broadcast news radio, and newspapers and wire services, traditional media, in following trends, see that and then will gravitate towards amateur radio for that coverage that I spoke of it when this webinar began tonight. And just to reiterate, just by simply putting in the hashtag ARL Field Day into social posts starting now, you can actually begin a PR campaign now that will have a 7-week life cycle leading up to field day itself. Now, getting back to what Oscar was asking about, Sid and I were on the phone today, and we're at the front end of this process, but by virtue of Sid's upcoming Thursday night sessions that will be designed for public information coordinators and public information officers leading up to field day, we will develop in greater detail to accommodate those positions who will still be under social restrictions on the 4th weekend of June, and that we can make arrangements for traditional media to come in and see operators operating from home, but make themselves available to professional journalists who in turn can capture that and use those images, probably not live, but use them in the context of traditional media applications. One thing I want to add is, and I'm glad we had an extensive conversation this evening on social media, which is where the ball is going in life. It's amazing how many people, and again, how many government officials still rely on citations from traditional media to become educated. And this is where we still have an edge in trying to educate both our federal, state, and local government officials as to what it is that amateur radio does. And so by using social media as a leverage tool to entice and excite traditional media for coverage is something that we're very eager to do. The last year that ARRL subscribed to a traditional newspaper clipping service before migrating over to Google to capture metrics, which was 2012. That year, the service that we were using, I don't even know if it's still in existence, called Bacon's Newspaper Clipping Service. That year, PIOs were able to generate readership among, are you ready for this? An estimated 8 to 12 million readers. Now, that doesn't mean that 8 to 12 million people picked up and read the exact story on amateur radio, but it does mean that 8 to 12 million sets of eyes were on newsprint instruments which contained amateur radio citations about field day. So keep that number in mind. That's still a very good number. That's still 1.5 to 2% of the entire American population. So we will work out the details about how folks can really take access about field day for those operating from homes. And of course, we'll use some of our past proven success formulas in those locations where field day will be able to take place in traditional outdoor settings that are publicly available. Let's see, back to Dan or back to Sid?
Oh, let me just see, Oscar, did that help you out with your question, sir?
Partially it does. The reason that I say partially is because we have to serve the field service. And we have to convince our amateur people to do the job, and we have to train them somehow that they can do the field day somehow. And I still don't get that answer. I think we should think about it. I think we should come back and get another meeting or talk about it by emails and pass the words to everybody how we can motivate the amateur to go on the air for the field day and at the same time go to the media itself. But we have to make it active, be able to make it real active from the amateur itself. And this is where this link is missing. So that's the reason I'm pointing this link.
Excellent. Well, thank you for bringing up that point. And I will be in contact with you because I'd like to talk more about it, and then we can share what we come up with. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Back to you, Dan.
Yeah, Sid, 2 questions here. One, you're having a thing, I think it's going to be on Thursday. I don't know how often. Can you tell us about that for the PICs, PIO, where a lot of this can be discussed and followed along? And the other question is probably for Bob. NQ1R, how is this going to play into lifelong learning? Is there going to be some stuff involved where, and at that standpoint, to help us out as hams? Go ahead, Bob.
In the context of field day?
In the context of public relations in general.
Oh, I think I think Ed talked about this a little bit. There's work on updating the PR 101 course, and the future of that course will reside in the new lifelong learning course structure that's being introduced eventually. Is that right, Ed? Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
Yep. So one of the cool things about this platform that ARRL is working on is that there's going to be a course infrastructure to be able to host different online courses. Some of that will be very targeted at new radio amateurs, but because we have that capability in the future, we'll be able to introduce resources for volunteers as well, programs involving training and education. So I think the PR 101 course is a perfect fit for the future lifelong learning course. In fact, I spent the last 8 hours today in this studio, 8 hours recording for ARRL's new Getting Started in Amateur Radio course, which will reside eventually in that lifelong learning course.
Sounds good. Sid, you want to follow up on about your meetings that you're having with the PIOs, PICs?
Sure. Yes, the field day related PR calls, PIOs, PICs, section managers, other field appointees are welcome to join us. I'll make sure that Andy does his demonstration, and we'll talk about some of the items that are going to be of importance to the participants on the call. The message went out on the section manager reflector and also on the PR reflector, but in a nutshell, they start next Thursday, the 14th, and there'll be a call on the 14th, the 21st, and the 28th. With, I believe it's on the 21st, we have a couple late calls, one at 10 Eastern, one at midnight, and then on the 28th, there's also a daytime call. And if we have a lot of participation and people want to have more calls, then we'll have them, and we just have to make sure that we have enough of the committee members on there, because nobody wants to listen to me for an hour talk about public relations and social media, because I am definitely not the expert, and we're very fortunate to have people who are experts on our committee. Back to you, Dan.
I think you're doing a great job. Sometimes being the expert is getting the experts to do their thing. Okay, and I'm assuming that you're going to give Steve Ewald the information for how to connect into your group when the meeting comes up, the Zoom or wherever you're using connection information.
Right, it's on GoToMeeting, and all I ask is for interested parties to just send me an email at my call sign, nh7c@arrl.net, and I'll be happy to share that login information. I'm doing a little data collection myself with who wants to participate so that I capture those folks.
Okay, I appreciate that a bunch. Are there any other questions out there?
Marty and Marilyn.
Go ahead, Marty.
All right, let me switch from social media to field day for just a second. I noticed something on the field day site there, and maybe this is historic in that I saw a lot more map pointers last year about this time and less this year, but I'm noticing that some of those map pointers are adding such things as based on COVID restrictions. Are they adding some things in there that would indicate that that's not to the public? Do you have any guidance? In other words, can we maybe eliminate some of the poetry and be more standardized, that perhaps I could share with my clubs here in Maryland, DC, so they realize that if you're posting it on the field day locator, you're doing it for the convenience of posting it, but you're also adding some information. And then before I leave you, one of these things we're trying to adopt here in Maryland is to have a single simplex VHF frequency for all field day sites. And the reason why, because they have a GOTA station, so if you know what that is, and that helps the staff as well as the field day site know that there's visitors coming, and they don't have to remember every talk-in frequency. And I'll tell you, when you're on the road as a section manager, traveling around with your smartphone trying to look up what the talk-in frequency is, I'll tell you, it gets a little crazy. And then anyway, we're trying to adopt a single simplex VHF frequency for talk-in, so guys like me and everyone else only has to remember one thing. Back to you. about Field Day Locator?
Well, hopefully by the time we get to field day, this virus thing is lifted, and we'll have group sessions where we'll have to use those to find the groups, and we can get out there and do that stuff. Okay, Sid, back to you.
Okay, great. I don't have any information on that. Marty, I like the idea of the simplex frequency, although I thought you had all of the Maryland repeaters memorized, even with the PL tones. So
I do.
Okay, all right. Just in case they change it.
Yeah, but the clubs don't use the repeaters.
True. True.
Right. So unless the club is actually at the repeater site, they avoid trying to use the repeater, because while field day is going on, they want they want that repeater to be freed up. But you're absolutely right. I do know almost all of them.
I was counting on you. There we go.
Yes, I
will.
will.
Right, and Bob might have some thoughts or maybe some information from the headquarters perspective on the locator. Bob, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the locator as probably some of you, but I just fiddled around in there while Marty was talking and noticed that some people have annotated their listings in the field day locator as canceled, some people as no visitors. So I think that's good. I think people are using it as intended. If they're finding ways to annotate their data with a little bit of extra information, that's great. Over.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, we'll take a look. Maybe that is part of the messaging, that whether it's the PR folks or just the field day folks in general from headquarters, remind people of that fact that if you don't put any parameters, we've got a lot of people who are interested in coming to a field day site, and if they don't see any other parameters on there, then perhaps they'll show up. And because they're not on the radio yet, unless they call somebody on a phone number, as long as it's in the pin or the little area with the pin that shows all the information, then you might get some unexpected visitors.
I'll share that too, Sid, with Paul Bork, who is the fellow at headquarters in Radio Sport who's managing the event for us. I'll share that with him first thing tomorrow morning, just so he's aware of how people are using it. You probably all know that ARL headquarters is managing a lot of online databases that have sort of taken on a different look. If you comb the VEC database for exam sessions, you'll find some that are going on and some flagged as canceled. If you comb the HamFest database, you'll find that some groups have opted to keep their listing in there, but it's flagged as canceled or postponed. So these databases have been used quite significantly right now. And the biggest argument back at headquarters is, do you spell canceled with 2 L's or 1? Over.
All right, thanks, Bob. Appreciate that. Back to you, Dan.
All right, I see somebody else has got a question there. Go ahead. No, they were just agreeing with you with a thumbs up. Okay.
Okay. No. It's that what about Marty that was asking him. I haven't seen the locator yet. I mean, I've seen it, but locally there's no club right now, any club. Something banged in my mind right now. Why not, if we could establish, if it's possible, because the proposal of the locators to go to public places. Well, what if you cannot go to public places? What about putting a parameter like the class? Maybe call some of the club with /D if they're going to be in some place of some house, / or -E. You're going to have a kind of alternative power operation. I don't know if it could be a waiver this year to, since everybody's maybe it's going to be in their home. I think there's supposed to be some kind of operations on public places depending on how the restrictions are being leveled off or not in the states over here. To now over here is up to May 25th. We don't know if it's going to be extended. How could we talk to Paul and to speak to him about that possibility? Because I think we got an email from the division director, Mickey Baker, that rules for field day are not going to change for class. They were asking if there could be any change to the class about it. And I have a question for Marty. If the simplest frequency is for talking between clubs, or to have a frequency for gotas, a simplest frequency for, okay, for a talking, a common frequency, another frequency for the gota station, for central simplest frequency for that. And before I pass it to you, Sid, I wanted to tell everybody here that now that we fill the rules also in Spanish, you could try PIOs, PICs, or if you have anyone, you could try. Now that also the PI, there's a PIO, Public package in Spanish, you could check out other outlets. I mean, I understand that it's states like New York, Florida, California, Texas. There are also Hispanic channels and networks like Telemundo. It's one, we have Telemundo here, and there's Univision. Those are the two big networks over there. So you can send up maybe a press release to see if, not the central stations, I mean the main networks, but there are also some outlets, some other affiliate stations that you could try on. So to give you an idea, just in case it's spam. If the interview has to be in English, I'm not sure. I have seen interviews to people in English that have some kind of somebody translate the interviews later on. So to have, I say this to have in mind. Back to you, Sid, and pass it then to Marty if he's still there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Angel. Passing it over to Marty. Go ahead.
Marty might have left.
Yeah, nope, I'm back. So that's a great question, Angel. And by the way, I haven't met you in what, 3 years? The last time I was down in Puerto Rico when I was down there with Oscar, and right. So my suggestion is that, and it serves two purposes, and I'm glad you mentioned that because you hit on both of those. One is one common VHF frequency, simplex, so that anyone who is a ham that wants to go to the site already knows the frequency. So if we're using 146.58, it's 146.58 for everybody for the talk-in frequency. And the other reason for using a single frequency is if I happen to be calling on 146.58 and I hear another field day site and it just happens to be on the way, or if I want to go from one to the next, by having one simplex field day site, all of the new hams that have the radios, they can program that single frequency in there. They can all communicate on a single simplex frequency at the field day site, and they can encourage their friends to do the same. And what I'm hoping for is to build a coalition of simplex users on field day that can have a group conversation that brings even more interest in. So the idea is, let's make it as easy as possible. We're all at home. I will tell you here in Maryland that all the nets are filled up. I've not heard more people on nets here than I've had in the last 10 years. And when we do field day, I would expect the same thing, fill up the frequency. So if we're not going to use it, then we're going to use it, lose it. Thanks, Angel.
Thanks, Marty. Back to you.
Okay. Is there anything else? Anybody else? Well, if you think of something before we close it out here, holler up. This has been a great, great session. I'm going to share it with the world. I appreciate everybody that participated. There's a lot of good stuff here. I'm hoping it's going to make a dent in how we get out there and get the media out there and knowing about what we do. So with that, I'm going to pass it back for Sid for final comments, and we'll close this out.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I appreciate everybody who was on the call. We had a very nice group, very large group. I hope we helped with answering some of your questions. And once again, at least you know that if you have questions and they aren't being answered, you can contact us. Dan, thank you very much for having us here. We're welcome to come back. Whether it's this subject or another subject, we're going to be happy to work with you and everybody that's on this call. And most of all, I really want to publicly thank the team that's on here that represents the Public Relations Committee. 100% participation from our committee. That's excellent, and I really thank them, because it's not about me, it's about us. So thank you very much. Back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Sid. And I appreciate you guys coming on tonight. It's been very helpful for us all. All right, unless there's something else, anybody got anything? Speak up. Okay, I'm going to call it quits for the night. Again, I appreciate everybody showing up tonight. I think you all know how to get a hold of Sid. If you forget, I know you know how to get a hold of me, and I will pass it on to Sid. So we will keep this thing going. 73s, everyone, and have a good evening.
73.
73.
73.
Everybody.